Now, have you ever thought about building an alpinist style watch? Well, if you have, or maybe even if you haven't, this could be the perfect video for you. What is up everyone, I'm Jason from JB Watch Mods. Welcome back to the channel. Now if you're like me, the Alpinist is a watch that has always been on my radar, but something that I've never really gone out of my way to check out. That is until Namoki Mods reached out to me and asked if I wanted to try out their Alpinist style build. So after doing a little bit of research, this seemed like an offer that I couldn't resist. So let's jump into it and see how this watch turns out. So let's jump into this build. Now the first thing we need to do with an NH34 movement is put on our movement washer. Now this is a small washer that goes over that center post before you put the dial on. Now that washer's a U-shaped and you want the bottom of the U sitting against the movement. That washer is just there to keep tension on the gears in the movement so they don't pop loose. Then we can go ahead and grab our dial. Now on our dial from Namoki Mods, we've got 4 feet on the back. Now we only need 2 of these feet to attach it to our NH34. Now I'm going to grab my pair of side cutters and remove 2 of the feet which I don't need. 1 from each side of the dial. To remove the feet, I hold onto them at the base and wiggle the dial back and forwards, and this will snap the feet off. Now when you do this, you'll be left with a small little nub on the dial which you can just see there. So what I'll do is grab my Dremel just to sand those flat. If you don't have a Dremel, a file would be perfect. Now this is an important step because if you don't file those little nubs down, the dial won't sit flat against the movement and you'll end up with high spots which might foul on the hands. Now once you sand those nubs down, you'll need to clean the back of the dial to remove any metal filings. So at this stage you can grab your air blower and give the back of the dial a good blowing down. This should remove any metal files left from that sanding process. Hitting it with some Rotoco would also be a good idea. Now we can go ahead and fit our dial to the movement. Now this is a simple matter of lining up the dial feet with the 2 holes located in the movement. Once you've got the dial aligned with the movement, all you need to do is press down on that movement and just make sure that it's sitting flat right the way around. So now that we've got our dial paired to our movement, we can get ready to fit our hand set. Now before we fit our hands, we need to get our movement in the correct position, which is at 12 AM. And to do that, you pull the crown out and wind the movement over until that date changes. Now we know we're at 12 AM, we can fit our first hand, which is going to be our GMT hand. Now with your NH34 movements, it's extremely important that your hand clearances are set correctly. As you've got 4 hands fitted to your NH34, you don't have a lot of room to play with. So I always rotate the movement over just to make sure that that GMT hand isn't going to foul on any of our indices. Once we're happy and we know it's all good, we can move on and fit out our hand. And you can see me here dabbing on that hand, just trying to fine tune the placement of that hand and get it right on 12 o'clock. And again, once we've got that hand pressed on, it's super important that we check our clearances to make sure that we've got enough clearance between our hour hand and our GMT hand. We also want to make sure that everything is lining back up at 12 o'clock where it should be. And that rotor coat is also great for cleaning any marks off your hands. But now we can move on to our minute hand. And same as before, just rotate that movement just to make sure that all your hands are clearing each other. And once you've confirmed all your clearances are good and everything lines back up, we can go ahead and set our second hand. And for me, the easiest way to do this is to roll that rotor into a cone shape and place your hand into the end of that rotor. This gives you nice control over the handset and doesn't leave any marks. Then we just need to confirm that everything clears each other and that our second hand is ticking away as it should. I'll also go ahead and test the first position of that crown. Our date changes when you turn that crown one way, and our GMT hand turns when you rotate that crown the opposite way. So now we don't really need that dummy crown stem fitted, so we can go ahead and remove that now. And we do this by depressing that small lever on the back side of the movement, which allows us to pull the crown out. Now we can start to assemble our case. Now when you get your case from Namoki Mods, it will come in 3 separate pieces. You've got your case, your chapter ring, and your bezel, which already has the crystal fitted. So that makes this a great option if you don't have a crystal press. Now you may notice those 4 holes in each corner of this case. Now they are screw holes which go through the case and into your bezel and secure that bezel and crystal. But before we do that, we need to fit our chapter ring. Now this chapter ring is a little bit different to your standard chapter ring. This one has little teeth on the bottom side of the chapter ring, which allow it to rotate inside the case by operating the lower crown, which is connected to a gear inside the case. It's super easy to install. Just drop it into the case and make sure that the gears are lining up and that you can rotate that bezel when you turn the crown. Now we can grab our bezel and crystal assembly. Now you can see here we've got a gasket on the underside of this bezel. So what we'll do is remove this gasket and lubricate it before installing it into the case. This gasket just acts as a moisture barrier to protect the watch from any water ingress. So once we put that gasket back into the small groove on the back side of that bezel, we can fit it to our case. So this is fairly straightforward. The only thing that you really need to watch out for is making sure that you've got the bezel aligned correctly. Once you know you've got that bezel in the correct position, you can flip it over and start putting in your screws. So this is a fairly straightforward process. Once you drop all the screws into the screw holes, I ran each screw in but left it slightly loose just so I could fine tune the alignment before going back over them and tightening down each screw in a star-shaped pattern. And now that we've got everything locked down nice and tightly, we'll just double check the operation of that bezel just to make sure that it still rotates nice and smoothly. And everything looks good, so we'll go ahead and start cleaning our crystal in preparation to case our movement. And for me, I find the easiest way to clean that crystal to get it nice and spotless is by using an air blower and a lens pen. I use the air blower to remove any large bits of debris and then go over it with the lens pen just to remove any fine smudges. I repeat that process until the crystal is spotless. And once we're happy that everything is perfectly clean, we can go ahead and pair the movement to the case. And one thing that you want to check when you're pairing your movement to your case, especially on your NH34 GMT, is that your second hand keeps on ticking over and doesn't foul on that crystal. Now that we've got our movement into the case, we can go ahead and get ready to cut our crown stem. And if you've been watching a few of my latest videos, you'd know by now that I'm just cutting these crown stems to length by eye. Now it's not exactly the technique that I'd recommend for you, but it works for me and I think that's what's important. A lot of people also seem to get a little bit upset that I use my side cutters to hold the crown stem. Yes, I am aware that there are other tools to do this job, such as a pin vise, but like I mentioned earlier, this way works for me, and I like doing this way because it's quick, efficient, and easy. I'm also holding the crown stem by the thread, and I'm not touching any part that enters the movement. And when you've been doing it this way for going on 5 years, you develop a really good feel for the tool and the material you're working with. But with all of that said, I still will pick up a pin vise one of these days. Now you can see there that that crown stem is still about 5mm too long. So we're going to pull it back out, remove the crown and cut about 5mm off and retry it to see how it looks. And once I do cut that crown stem, I like to file down the end of the thread just to make sure there are no sharp edges that will damage the threads inside the crown. Now you can see here that that crown screws all the way down flush into the case, and that we've still got a little bit of play when the crown is pulled out, which means the crown stem is now the perfect length. So we'll pull it back out one last time, unscrew that crown, and then put some Loctite on the thread to make sure it doesn't come loose. And just use some medium strength Loctite for this, because if you ever need to pull that crown back out to do any repairs, it'll be nice and easy. And this may be obvious, but make sure you wipe off any excess Loctite before putting it back into the movement. Now when I fit this for my last time, I always double check everything to make sure that everything is working as it should. Now with our crown stem cut to length and fitted into the case, the hardest steps of putting this watch together are now behind us. So now onto the case back. Now before we fit this case back, we need to make sure that we lubricate the gasket. And this will just help to maintain the water resistance rating of the watch. So to lubricate that gasket, we'll just use a silicone lubricant and then pop it into our case back. Now this case back has a groove in which the caseback gasket sits. Just double check your case, as some cases have the caseback gasket fitted to the caseback itself. And just try to get that gasket sitting into the case as best you can, because the last thing you want is to pinch that gasket between the case and the case back. If you do pinch the gasket, it'll most likely result in moisture being able to enter the case. So just make sure you start your case back by hand, just so you get a good feel of what's happening when you screw that case back down. Then once you're confident everything is good and that case back is screwing down nicely, grab your case back tool and lock it down. And with that, the watch assembly is complete. And like I mentioned at the start of this video, I never really had the Alpinist on my radar. It's a watch that I had kind of seen but never paid too much attention to. But as with most builds I do, they really start to grow on me. And I'm starting to see the reason why this watch has a bit of a cult following. It makes me realise that seeing pictures of a watch online never really do the watch justice. It's not until you can see the watch in person, in your own hands, that you can truly understand the presence that that watch has. So let's get this strap fitted and we can see what this thing looks like on the wrist. Now Namoki have a beautiful Jubilee bracelet with a nice milled clasp, really high quality. It's also got micro adjustment in the clasp and solid end links, really nice bracelet. So to attach our bracelet, we pop our spring bars through the end links, and then I use a small screwdriver just to get those spring bars seated into the holes in the case. Then we can repeat that for the other side and this watch is done. So that is going to do it for today's video. Now this build has definitely changed the way I think of the Alpinist style watch and is definitely something that I'm going to look further into the future. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of this style. I just wanted to give Namoki Mods a massive shout out for supplying the parts for this build. Now if you've liked this video or got anything helpful out of it, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you all in the next video.